know when you used to boot up your PS1, it was cool and all, and then you got the PS2 startup screen, really creepy ambient blue towers that load in the background before your disc boots? Well, it turns out those aren't actually just random cool geometric structures. Each and every single one of those is actually representing a save file on your memory card, and the height of the tower, well, that change is actually based on how many hours you played that game. The console was basically tracking your gaming habits and building a 3D monument to your life. It's kind of cool when you think about it that way. Makes it a little less creepy. But in true physical cursed energy, we have the Wu-Tang controller for the PlayStation 1. This monstrosity was made specifically for the fighting game Wu-Tang Shaolin style? I don't want to say that wrong. And it is literally just a massive piece of plastic shaped like a W. It has no analog sticks, no rumble. It looks like hand cramp city. It does not look nice to play with. I do want to track one down though, because imagine someone coming into your room being like, yo, I'm going to play your PS1. Okay, you have to use the Wu-Tang controller. I mean, it's kind of cool. And speaking of physical pain, the reality vest, because apparently playing a shooter with DualShock controllers wasn't immersive enough. Sony released a peripheral vest that's strapped around your torso, and it vibrated air, and it compressed every time you took damage in a game. I mean, if you have claustrophobia, that sounds like your worst nightmare, right? It didn't make you feel like you were in a war zone though, it literally just made you feel like you were in a washing machine, supposedly. And finally, for PlayStation and Sony, we of course have to talk about the PSX, which isn't the original PS1. The actual PSX, which was released in 2003 in Japan, Sony built a gigantic, heavy white brick that was a PS2, perfectly combined with a digital video recorder for your TV. It was actually the very first console to use that famous cross-media bar menu that the PS3 and PSP would eventually adapt and use. However, it was incredibly heavy, wildly expensive, and it bombed so hard that they never even released it anywhere else. I mean, Sony, some of your failures are interesting. I hope you bring out a little care package with the PSX, your vibrating suit, and the Wu-Tang controller. I mean, I'm sure some people would love that stuff. If you wanted to talk about controllers that were interesting and only served one purpose, we have for the Xbox the Gamester FPS Master. This was a third-party controller that was specifically built for first-person shooters like Halo. Instead of standard handles, it had two massive extended pistol hand grips. The A, B, X and Y buttons weren't on the front. They were hidden on the inside grips, so you had to squeeze them with your middle and ring fingers just to reload a weapon. It even had an actual built-in LCD screen, so you could program the buttons. It looked absolutely comical, but some people swore it gave them an unfair advantage. And we didn't really get much for Xbox for this one, so we have the crown jewel of Xbox absurdity, the Steel Battalion. This was not just a video game, it was a physical commitment. To play this mech simulator, you had to buy a custom controller that had a literal footprint of 354 square inches. It was so big, it required its own furniture. We are talking about 44 total inputs. It had two joysticks, a throttle handle, a radio channel dial, 5 toggles, 3 foot pedals, down on the floor, and a literal functional plastic flip-up eject button that you had to slap if your mech was about to explode, or your save file would be permanently deleted. And on top of all of that, it cost $200 back in 2002. Imagine the price now if it were released today. And also imagine trying to explain to your parents why you need a massive plastic cockpit taking up the entire living room floor just to drive a digital robot. When it comes to Nintendo are basically a toy company that make video games. So they have always been willing to experiment, but sometimes those experiments end up feeling deeply cursed, or just failed and obscure. Let's start with something I'm sure most of you who are watching this will probably know, but for those of you who don't, this is the Virtual Boy. It was released in 1995, and it wasn't actually virtual reality. It was basically a high-end tech migraine simulator. You had to hunch over and shove your face into this heavy plastic visor mounted onto a flimsy metal bipod. Every single game was displayed in an agonising high-contrast pure red and black colour scheme. It strained your eyes, gave people terrible headaches, and forced you to sit in the worst posture imaginable. It bombed so incredibly hard that Nintendo completely killed it in less than a year. Then there's Rob. I'm sure you all know him from Smash Bros. But he was the robotic operating buddy. After a massive video game crash in 1983, American retailers refused to stock gaming consoles, so Nintendo pulled off the greatest Trojan horse in gaming history. They packaged their NES with this slow, plastic robot and convinced the stores that it was high-tech, interactive, and a toy. The catch? Rob only ever worked for exactly 2 games. He moved at a glacial pace, loudly whirred his gears, and required you to shoot with your TV with a light gun, just to get him to slowly pick up a spinning top. After you played those 2 games, he just became a very intimidating, silent, plastic observer sitting on top of your TV. But the absolute peak of cursed Nintendo history has to be the Game Boy camera. In 1998, they actually released a low-res, grayscale digital camera that plugged directly into your Game Boy. It had some weird mini-games and menus, but if you selected the run option to back out of the screen, the game had a random chance to completely freeze. Suddenly, the screen would flash to one of 3 heavily distorted, terrifyingly photorealistic faces with the text, "Who are you running from?" Just think about that, a casual, deeply unsettling piece of analog horror programmed directly into a children's toy by Nintendo developers for absolutely no reason whatsoever.
EC.
First up, we have the Novan Falcon. If you look at this thing, it doesn't even look like a controller. It looks like an expensive piece of medical equipment or a robotic arm used to dismantle bombs. The gimmick here was 3D force feedback. Instead of a rumble pack buzzing in your hands, you held onto this detached grip that was suspended by 3 robotic arms. If you were playing Half-Life and you shot a shotgun, the arm would physically violently kick back against your hand. If you walked through mud, the motors would tense up and make it physically difficult to push the controller forward. It was incredibly immersive, but it also meant that after about 20 minutes of playing a shooter, your arm felt like you'd just finished a heavy workout at the gym and you probably had carpal tunnel for the rest of your life. But if a robotic arm kicking you wasn't dystopian enough, let me introduce you to the OCZ Neural Impulse Actuator. And yes, that was the actual name on release. Released in 2008, this was a literal rubber headband loaded with biometric sensors that you strapped to your forehead. The claim was that you could play PC games using only your brainwaves and facial muscles. And the craziest part is, it kind of worked. You had to calibrate it by doing things like clenching your jaw to shoot or darting your eyes to strafe left and right. Playing a game of Unreal Tournament meant sitting completely motionless in a dark room, furiously clenching your teeth and twitching your eyebrows like a maniac. It was exhausting, it gave everyone terrible tension headaches, and it felt like a weird psychological experiment disguised as a gaming peripheral. And that's going to be all that I have time for today. I hope that you did learn something interesting today and picked up some new information about weird physical gaming accessories, I guess. I don't know. And if you didn't learn anything, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you would, feel free to consider subscribing, dropping a like, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.